I swore under my breath as I banged my knuckle on the fence post. No matter how many times I lifted it, twisted it, and leant on it, it wouldn't straighten. It mocked me. I was getting frustrated. My shoulders burned. I felt like I was doing too much for an 11-year-old. But growing up on a small farm in Tasmania would do that to you. It wasn't McDonald's farm, but we did have 10 cows, 20 sheep, and 40 chickens, which meant the fences were always just one stupid cow away from needing fixing. My dad sensed my frustration, and he took this faraway look as he looked out over the paddock and leaned on this leaning post. He goes, "Hey, Leon, do you know how to tell the difference between crap from a cow and crap from a bull?" I'm like, I didn't know there was a difference. Maybe this is some deep farm wisdom. Maybe it's diet related or milk production. I didn't know. He goes, "Well, you've got to get a shovel and you slide it in, right in underneath that crap. And then you toss it high in the air. And if the crap falls back down to the ground, it's cow shit. But if it stays in the air, it's bullshit." And he grinned at me. And I was 11, and it took me a moment. But tired, sore, and laughing, I realised something. Sometimes gratitude doesn't show up as a thank you. Sometimes it's a laugh when everything hurts. Mum, Dad, my two brothers and I, we didn't have too much growing up. But firewood was one of the ways we brought cash into the house. We traded eggs for milk and fruit and vegetables. We traded farm produce, meat, for pretty much everything else. It was sort of like in the Tasmanian version of Afterpay, but with more mud and dirt. But firewood was the way we brought cash in. $100 a load, 3 or 4 loads a weekend, which normally meant 5 of us jammed in the front seat of a ute, which in retrospect was probably, well, definitely illegal. We had the chainsaws behind the seat and lunch in an old ice cream container. And I remember one day we're heading out to cut a load of wood and we had our beloved puppy Tiny tied to the back of the ute. Tiny was a little black and white bundle of joy, the runt of an accidental litter between a Jack Russell and a fox terrier. Nobody wanted him, so we kept him. And Tiny went everywhere with us, tail going like a propeller, barking at every cow like he was on patrol. And as we're heading out to the forest, I was changing the gears because I had to straddle the stick in the front of the ute. And then, barely audible over the thrum of the diesel engine, the barking stopped. Dad slowed the ute, and the rope was there, and the collar was there, but Tiny was not. We turned the ute around, and the road felt much longer heading back, and the kids were scrambling on the seat to try and look a little further over the dash. And then, there he was, still, gone. And there was should have been waking up from a nap, but there was a softness to the outside of his head that still makes me feel sick. There were no words, but lots of sobs as Dad lifted the Tiny and put him in the tray of the ute. And even though I know he now regrets it, he looked around our faces. And we're only minutes from the forest. And we needed the money. $100 meant a lot. So we cut the firewood. And chainsaws running and the eyes of 3 young children stinging. Something shifted in me. I felt childhood release its grip. And the deepest sense of the world stepped in. In one moment, when I stepped away to rub my eyes and take some deep breaths, I realised something. I realised that every shadow that exists in your life is only there because there is a light somewhere behind it. Around the same time, my brother flew to Melbourne for surgery. They finally agreed with his mum that he wasn't just a lazy and tired kid. His arteries looked like a string of sausages. And at just 9 years old at the Royal Melbourne's hospital, they opened him up like a pencil case. All his insides were on the outside. And they replaced the arteries that go to his kidneys and legs. And after they stuffed it all back inside and zipped him up, which is a very, very specific medical term, they told him he couldn't eat for a whole month. No food, no treats, nothing for 30 days. And all that 9-year-old little boy wanted was an icy pole. Surely that's just frozen water, he argued, but no. And then one day, a lovely nurse named Jodie walked into the ward. She walks up to Craig and said, "Craig, I saw this and I thought of you." She reached into a little bag at her hip. She pulled out a little brown teddy bear with white tufts of fur on its ears. Craig took it and held it to his chest and said, "Thank you so much, I love it. I'm going to call it Icy Pole." Light from dark. More recently, Craig was back in the ICU again. He's now had over 400 operations and procedures. He was intubated, feeding tube through his nose, but this time he was intubated because his kidneys had finally failed him and his lungs had filled with fluid. And I walked into the room and I saw Craig holding a little magnetic toy, a board. Because of the big tube down his throat, he couldn't talk. And I walked in and I smiled, and his wife, Christy, sitting at the end of the bed, tried to smile back to me. But it was one of those smiles that never quite reaches your eyes. And I could tell that she was trying to hold it all together and not show that she was shit scared. As I sat down next to Craig, tubes hanging out of his face, sensors all over his body, new cuts where they'd had to cut ports to help with drainage, and his scars on full display. I said, "Holy shit, dude. You better hope that hamster in your chest doesn't stop running. He's the only thing keeping you going." And he wrote on the little magnetic board, "Leave him alone. He's doing his best." And Christy and I laughed. And Craig tried to laugh, but it hurt. And he called me a bastard. Even in the darkest rooms, we found some light. So now, when I think about gratitude, I think about driving in the car with my kids, playing Spotto. You're driving along, somebody yells out a yellow car, and inevitably I get smacked in the arm. And suddenly, yellow cars are everywhere. They were always there. Nothing changed on the road. What changed was what you were looking for. And that's what light and dark taught me. The shadows do not mean that the light is gone. You just need to prioritise looking for it. Tiny is still gone. But my son loved cutting firewood with me on a recent farm visit. Hospital rooms still suck. But getting called a bastard by an Etch-a-Sketch still makes me smile. The pain, it mattered. But gratitude lives in the contrast. Not instead of the dark, because of it. Gratitude is not about trying to change what you're going through. simply about noticing the yellow cars that were there all along. So now, when I'm driving and I see a yellow car, I don't look to whack an arm. Now, I see a yellow car and I think about something I'm grateful for. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think